Shalom lekulam and welcome back to another Che Languages video. My name is Yair and today we're actually going to be doing a different sort of video than the regular format. This video was inspired from a comment left by a viewer asking if I could talk about jargon, which at first I thought was not a worthy topic for a video. However, I then reconsidered when I considered the very similar concept of a cant, also known by the French name argot, meaning slang. To the general public, these are usually called secret languages, and many of you watching probably already know or understand some sort of secret language that you might use in a particular community. However, the difference between jargon and a cant or argot is that jargon is usually slang associated with a particular career or area of expertise, whereas cants developed out of necessity for a variety of reasons. Sometimes it was to avoid persecution or to identify other members of that community with effectively dog whistles, as was the case for many LGBT argot such as Polari in British English. Other times they might have developed amongst thieves or in organised crime as to not be identified by the police or members of the public, such as Cockney rhyming slang in London. However, in the modern day, many of these secret languages have contributed to the general slang used within the wider language in question today. And to begin, we're going to talk about one of the most well-known argots, that being verlan, spoken in France. Verlan is so well known because it effectively forms the basis of modern French slang, that being the French spoken in France. Verlan is often compared as Paris's version of Cockney rhyming slang, having formed in the 19th century in Paris and used by the criminal underground. However, instead of rhyming, verlan forms its unique vocabulary by reversing the syllables. To demonstrate this, consider that the name verlan is formed from l'envers, meaning the inverse. This fun way of mixing words up became popular in France from the 1950s onwards as it made its way into popular culture, but some words are still clearly related to their crime origins. For example, the slang term for policeman is a word keuf, which originates as an inverse of flic, which itself already is a slang word. Some other well-known examples are c'est franc for français, tromé for métro, and cimer instead of merci. I could go on, but I think you all get the idea. New verlan is being innovated all the time within the modern crime scene in France, but these well-known examples are used by youth across a lot of France, especially in Paris and the surrounding areas. Continuing in the French language, just on the other side of the Atlantique, we have joual, another French-based argot popular in Quebec, the main francophone province of Canada. Specifically, joual developed amongst working-class francophones in Montreal, but has spread out throughout Quebec today, although other cities such as Ville-de-Québec and Trois-Rivières would not associate with joual or Montreal. Today, joual is often used as a marker of Montreal's speech, as les Montrealais take pride in joual. However, it was not always the case, as like many working class varieties of speech, joual was stigmatized and suppressed. It is thought that joual comes from the French word cheval, meaning horse, part of a larger phrase, parler français comme un cheval, or to speak French like a horse. However, joual now enjoys a status of pride in Montreal. It preserves many features of Middle French that were common amongst the early settlers in French America, but later became non-standard in both the French in Europe and everywhere else. For example, the modern moi et toi are often pronounced moi et toi. Contractions found in modern French slang, such as de la becoming de la, are common, and much unique vocabulary from older French varieties or from Canadian English are also used in joual, such as the verb checker, meaning to check, instead of the French equivalent vérifier, and bicycle instead of vélo for bicycle. Joual also commonly pronounces il est as y, and some verbs take a different form too. For example, in Standard French, the way to say I believe is je crois, but in joual the form is je crée. Additionally, to say I do or I make in Standard French is je fais. But once again, in joual, the form is either je vas or je fasse, which I suspect is an older form of the word. However, let's move on to a different argot spoken in a country next to France. This secret language would be Xiriga, spoken in and around Ribasea and Llanes in Asturias in northern Spain. This cant is similar to a jargon, as it is occupation related, one spoken by tejeros, migrant workers who often laboured as construction workers. Historically, they were pretty badly treated by their employers, so the tejeros developed a cant known as Xiriga. The occupation no longer exists, and the language was not written as most of the workers were illiterate, but some records of words have been kept. What made it interesting is that despite being quite far from the Basque country, Xiriga used vocabulary drawn from Basque words, such as asua for fire from Basque sua, and ergin, meaning stonecutter, coming from the Basque word jargon. As a bonus secret language, in neighbouring Galicia, there is another argot called fala dos arxinas. The word arxina, also meaning stonecutter, coming from the same Basque word, and was spoken, similarly, by travelling stonecutters in the past. However, sticking with Xiriga, some of their vocabulary is also formed similar to that of Velon. The feature in Spanish is known as besre, and is found in many Spanish dialect slang. In Xiriga, the word for mother is drama and father is drape, being a reverse of madre and padre. However, our next argot takes us to neighbouring Portugal. In the small town of Mindo in the Santarém province of Portugal, there is an argot simply named Minderico, after the town. It was originally spoken by traders and producers in the textile business. However, it has now become a sociolect associated with the town, and the residents see it with pride. Unfortunately, it only has around 150 speakers today, with a reported 24 being fluent, compared to the population of Mindo, which stands at around 3,000. There is some local interest in revitalization of the cant, as evidenced by the fact that 15 of the fluent speakers are actually new speakers, having learnt it, and apparently its influence is still seen throughout the town, with nicknames of people in the community usually deriving from physical characteristics described in Minderico rather than Portuguese. Minderico is formed primarily from Old Portuguese, with mixed vocabulary from other sources, and then formed syntactically in a way different to Standard Portuguese. Finding resources on the language was difficult, but I will link a video displaying the language where it seems to sound exactly like Portuguese, but the words do not match up with the subtitles. I'd be interested to see what any of my Portuguese or Brazilian viewers think of Minderico. Let me know in the comments. Talking of Brazil, the next cant we're going to look at is pajuba, used in Brazil. This argot developed quite recently, from the 1960s to the 1980s, during the military rule in Brazil. This is because minorities such as Afro-Brazilians and LGBT people were targeted unfairly by the police during this time, so they developed an argot to bypass this. It was first developed by the Afro-Brazilians of the Candomblé and Ubanda faiths, two syncretic African diaspora faiths mixed with Catholicism that are observed by many in Brazil. For this reason, the cant adopted much vocabulary from African languages such as Yoruba, Fon, Umbundu, Kikongo, and more. This variety of speech was also later adopted by the LGBT community in Brazil, so currently the users of the cants are either part of the Pride community or are adherents to these Afro-Brazilian faiths. The LGBT influence can be seen on certain vocabulary. For example, pajuba makes a distinction between a homosexual male and another homosexual male who is closeted, the words being ade and adefunto, respectively. Some vocabulary I suspect comes from African languages include oni, meaning water, ravi, meaning killer, and shaum, meaning meeting. Once again, if you're watching this from Brazil, let me know in the comments what you think of pajuba. Now, our next secret language is the first one not to be based on a Romance language, this argot once being spoken across various German-speaking countries. It had a few names, the most well-known being Rotwelsch, meaning beggars foreign. Fun fact, the German word Welsch, meaning foreign, is related to Welsh in English, which was basically a name given by the Anglo-Saxons to the Celts who spoke a foreign language in their own land. Anyway, another name for Rotwelsch is Hochmeloshen, which interestingly comes from Yiddish, though ultimately through Hebrew, and it means wise language. Though based on High German dialects, Rotwelsch draws vocabulary from many other languages, traditionally marginalized groups who would have been involved with the organized crime that caused Rotwelsch to be developed. These languages including Low German dialects, Yiddish, Romani, Czech, and some Hebrew and Latin. I was surprised to see Hebrew and Yiddish, but words like Yom and Laila for day and night are common in Rotwelsch, and the verb meaning to eat is acheln, deriving from the Hebrew verb lechol, which, for a bonus fact, is also seen in Judeo-Italian achlare. What's interesting is that it's conjugated with German rules, and the same goes for Judeo-Italian. Some other words found in Rotwelsch include Schokelmai for coffee, Kreuzspanner for waistcoat, Bleffen meaning to threaten, and for some more words from Hebrew, Bal Mishpet from Bal Mishpat meaning magistrate, and Bal Dovern meaning to spy from Bal Davar. Overall, this is a very interesting argot, especially for its Jewish influence despite being used by many non-Jews. However, a more specifically Jewish argot was used in Central and Eastern Europe, being a modified form of Yiddish. This argot was known as klezmer loshen and was used by traveling musicians or klezmorim, which comes from Hebrew klezmer, meaning musical instruments. It was once used by the musicians to communicate amongst each other, often behind stage, to discuss payments or other matters without being understood by neither Jews nor Nochrim. Klezmer loshen drew much of its vocabulary from other European languages, notably Slavic languages. However, similar to Yiddish, the Holocaust sadly caused its entire extinction. Some speakers of klezmer loshen who had emigrated to America survived, and thus the argot was able to be recorded and preserved. As the recent trend of Yiddish revival has taken off amongst Ashkenazim, especially in the United States and here in England, klezmer loshen is also experiencing a small revival of popularity amongst Jewish musicians in the diaspora. I will link a paper on klezmer loshen above, but sadly I don't have any samples to provide you with here. However, sticking with Jewish argot, I will talk about a variety that I'm more familiar with and understand to a great degree. I say variety because it's hard to say if it is an argot/secret language or if it is just instead considered jargon or a dialect. Nonetheless, Yeshivish is a variety of Jewish English often associated with Orthodox and Haredi Jews who attend yeshivot, or religious Jewish schools dedicated for the story of the Torah, Talmud, and other holy texts. Yeshivot are for particularly dedicated students who generally intend to go on to become rabbis or at least scholars in some capacity. Yeshivish isn't necessarily the same thing as Yinglish, as it tends to draw more of its vocabulary from Hebrew and Aramaic rather than Yiddish, and the vocabulary usually relates to religious texts, phrases, or idioms. Also, Sephardic Jews who speak English might also speak Yeshivish, so it's an error to assume that it is solely a highly Yiddishized form of English. That would instead be Yinglish. Nonetheless, it does overlap with phrases such as shkoyach, being a Yiddishized form of the phrase yishar koach, which is used to mean thank you in Yeshivish. As mentioned, some Aramaic phrases are used, such as davka, meaning specifically or precisely. A related phrase, lav davka, meaning not necessarily. Dina da malchut dina, basically, the law is the land of the law. The Jewish equivalent of when in Rome, do as the Romans do, but in a more legal sense, specifically with taxation laws. There is another phrase, mai nafkamina, which is an Aramaic phrase from the Talmud, which means what is the practical difference. The Hebrew intensifier mamash is a very common usage in Yeshivish, being used to mean really or very. As I mentioned, Yeshivish is not strictly one solid variety, so more Yiddishized varieties do exist, particularly in places like New York or London. Sometimes Yiddish grammar can be applied, affecting things like word order. For example, it wouldn't be unnatural to express the phrase, "You open the door for me" in Yeshivish as "For me you open the door," as this is common word order in Yiddish. Do support, that is using do to ask questions, may also be dropped from Yeshivish, and instead intonation is used to ask questions, such as "Do you like coffee?" in English being expressed as "You like coffee?" in Yeshivish. I could go on for a long zman about many more features. Aval, I think I've displayed maspik dugmot. Yeshivish is the closest davar that exists to Judeo-English, though no such lashon has developed yet. It does exist on a spectrum, and I would struggle to understand some of the mamash heavy, particularly Yiddish influenced dibur, as I am a dove Ivrit with only a bisel of Yiddish chokhmah, and I am sadly not a yeshiva talmid. Nonetheless, I understand it more than any other lashon on this reshima, and I thought it would be manyen to include. Moving on, however, I found a bit more of a, quote, fun argot in Russia, developed much more recently online, essentially as a meme. It's called Padonkavsky jargon, according to Wikipedia, but it seems that Albanian is the more used term, being Albansky in Russian. The story is that back in 2004, an ignorant American user of the website LiveJournal complained about people speaking a different language. He did not know which language it was, and so asked one of the speakers, and Russians, not being able to resist with their humor, told the American it was Albanian. The American then made a post stating, "It's LiveJournal, an American website, not an Albanian website. Plus, being an American means that the rest of the world should have to cater to me. But that's just my point of view." I must note that LiveJournal is a Russian-owned website, not an American one. Russians then responded to this by spamming the American with messages saying, "Learn Albanian." The meme then became Albanian in Russian, where the meme is referred to as Uchu Albansky. The users took the meme a step further and started creating a secret language, calling it Albanian. The argot is effectively only created from modifying Russian words. For example, unstressed O becomes A, and as can be seen with the name Albanian, the other way around applies too. The consonant V becomes F, certain hard consonants become soft, the endings ik and j become eg and j respectively, and the letter ya is often replaced with ya. My Russian is not good enough to hear the difference between some of these. For example, I'm not sure what the difference in pronunciation is between ya and ya. I think the former might be more emphasized. However, some classic examples of Albansky include privet instead of privyet for hello, aftar instead of aftor for author, and yazyk instead of yazyk for language. This argot is not really created for the same purpose as others are, more for a joke. It is supposed to be easy to understand to anyone who learns the rules, but otherwise would look confusing. I thought this would be a fun addition to the video. However, let's talk about one more secret language that I have saved for the end because it's a language I've wanted to talk about for a long time now. That language is a highly developed cant called a cryptolect by the Wikipedia page, which I think is a really cool term. The language I am referring to is of course Ainu, a Turkic cant which is heavily based on Iranian vocabulary. The Ainu people are a semi-nomadic Turkic group closely related to the Uyghurs, and usually they would speak Uyghur elsewhere. However, a major defining factor of the Ainu people is that they follow Alevism, a syncretic denomination of Shia Islam, although some count it as its own religion. Historically, Alevism was considered heresy, and the Ainu people did not want to publicly profess their faith. Thus this argot was developed, in which the grammar follows all the same rules as Uyghur, but the vocabulary is mainly Iranian in origin. Around 12,000 speakers of Ainu exist today, and apparently all the speakers are men. I cannot find out why, as it's not necessarily related to an occupation. There is a theory that Ainu may have originally been an Iranian language that was Turkicized over time, but I believe that the other way around is more likely, as grammar is less likely to change over vocabulary. An example of Enu is found in the numbers, which follow from 1 through 5 are yek, du, si, char, and penje, compared with the Uyghur numbers bir, iki, üç, dört, and bash. Indeed, the Enu numbers resemble the Persian numbers very closely, which are yek, du, se, char, and pench. Furthermore, the ordinal numbers in Enu display the Persian numerals with Uyghur inflections on them, being yakinji, durinji, sirinji, etc., compared with Uyghur birinji, ikinci, üçinci, etc. I will link a I Love Languages video with more samples above. I've wanted to share this video for a while because I find it quite funny, as you will see. However, let's conclude this video now. Thank you all for watching. I hope you liked this different format. It's not supposed to become the new standard, but has allowed me to talk about more languages with a given time, though of course I didn't go as in-depth as I usually would, and part of the reason for that is some of these cants don't have a lot of examples and information about them, which is kind of the purpose of an argot. Nonetheless, I hope you found this an interesting subject, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you once again. Tודה רבה ויאללה ביי.